With all the new Marvel announcements regarding their new mutant era, I think it's safe to say that they've finally decided to kill off their original plans post-Endgame. Personally, this is a death that I don't mind at all. When it comes to endings that did hit hard, I've got quite the list for you now. That's right. Today, the TV Regent presents to you the top 25 X-Men deaths in the movies.
Your mouth is moving a lot like a rat. Yappa, 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 yappa. Shut it, please.
Scott Summers has always been an underutilized character in the OG X-Men franchise, and even his newer version in the rebooted timelines just looked like he was there to simp after Jean Grey. That dude clearly didn't do his research, because if he did, he would have known that the very same woman he's down bad for actually ended up killing his previous version. Seeing Jean Grey utilize her Phoenix powers to suppress Scott's laser eyes was almost promising at first, but soon after we realized that Cyclops is going to meet his demise thanks to his own mutant powers. This happened so suddenly, and we didn't even get to witness the actual death. It's all implied. However, it does have an impact because of how broken down Cyclops was after believing he lost his girl. The moment he felt everything got fixed was actually the moment everything went downhill. What's worse is the bro was in the middle of some tongue action too. This was literally the kiss of death. Well, at least the dude got to get a little bit freaky before bidding us farewell. Not every movie character can claim such a feat now, can they?
You can't hurt me.
Lady Deathstrike would have been such a cool character if the execs decided to keep her on for future X-Men projects. Unfortunately, they felt the best way to utilize this character was to have her brainwashed by Stryker's serum and then fight her way to death due to an overdose of adamantium. The fight between her and Wolverine will remain a key moment from X2, and their encounter was going so well right until Logan decided to stop playing and gave Deathstrike his version of the Hwak-Twa.
And spit on that thing.
Okay, I don't know why I made that reference, but if you look at the liquid adamantium pouring out of her mouth, I mean, it does seem kinda apt, right? Anyway, it was quite sad to see such a promising character go out like that, especially because she snapped back to her true self mere moments before she met her end. I mean, even Wolverine was regretting it. That's not something you see often now, is it? That little thud noise when she sinks to the bottom of that tank was a nice little touch to remind us about the amount of metal inside that pure mutant's body. The Sentinels are the most brutal villains I've ever seen in the entire X-Men franchise, and for good reason too. Those monsters didn't have the word defeat in their dictionary, and they talk the talk in the most heartless manner possible. I wasn't expecting to start a film with so many X-Men deaths, and the fact that this was actually a repetitive cycle only made the impact a lot deeper. Now, we see a lot of mutants meeting their end here, like Storm and Iceman, but one particular scene that still remains in my head is the one where those two Sentinels rip freaking Colossus in half. Let me just remind you that this dude's body is made of steel, so for the Sentinels to achieve this, it was a pretty impressive feat. Of course, there's also the tragic part about seeing a cool mutant die in front of our very eyes, but I guess that's why this is considered to be one of the better X-Men films. Oh yeah, this scene was kind of mixed in with Sunspot's death as well, as I have to give a shout out to him too, although I'm not sure if his spirit would like that. Also, I wonder how Deadpool would have reacted upon seeing his treasured Colossus getting ripped apart like that. Sebastian Shaw really has no shame when it comes to taking lives, whether they're mutants or humans. We already know what he did to poor Magneto's mom, but this particular scene with Darwin was also quite hard-hitting. It's natural to see casualties in the middle of the fights and wars, but this one was so difficult to digest because of the manner in which Shaw executes his victim. The man literally harnesses Alex's blast into an energy ball and feeds it to Darwin so that his opposition can watch how they contributed to the death of their own teammate. I mean, that is really a sick mentality to possess, but it's also what makes Shaw such an excellent villain. Seeing Darwin struggle while trying to adapt to the energy ball wasn't an easy task, and that final hand-raising gesture must have definitely made Alex feel some kind of way. Yeah, I know there's no evidence shown prior to this scene which proves that Darwin wouldn't be able to adapt to this, but sometimes lazy writing can allow the emotions to seep in further.
Adapt to this.
Wolverine is a grade A badass, there's no question about it. However, such characters usually have extremely tragic beginnings, and in the case of Logan, it happens to be him killing his own dad. Well, to be honest here, I'm not sure if the guy he mauls is his actual dad because his mom's slain lover looked more like Wolverine. I guess that's why her husband was really upset, and it also explains why Saber-tooth and Logan look nothing like each other.
We're brothers, Jimmy. You realize that? Brothers protect each other.
Anyway, the point remains that the Wolverine has now awakened and he decides to enact his first kill with the famed method of patricide. It's definitely shocking to see a little boy commit such a heinous act, but I just want to take a moment and call out the shady mom. First she cheats on her husband, then she becomes the reason he gets killed by her son, and then she has the nerve to ask Logan, "What are you?" Woman, that question should have been directed to you. Even Amber Heard ain't got nothing on this female.
I'm going to count to 3, and I'm going to move the coin. 1.
Please, Eric.
I just spoke about Shaw being an impressive villain, but it's time for us to say goodbye to him from this list because his own death scene was a pretty satisfying one. It's not gory or anything like that, but it does come with a massive dose of mental humiliation, which is exactly what would have stung him the most. Considering Shaw's powers, it would have been almost impossible to defeat him, but when Magneto and Professor X come together, they render the term redundant. Of course, Eric can do much by himself alone, but the moment he snatched the helmet and allowed Charles to control Shaw's head, we all knew this was going to be the end of him. The look on Shaw's face is pretty appropriate for this scene because it's exactly the kind of expression Magneto would have wanted to witness while passing a coin through his victim's head. Well, I don't think victim is an appropriate term for Shaw, considering he's only meeting his end because of murdering Eric's mom. But either way, it's a cold-blooded murder. I do genuinely wonder what must have been going on in his head right before the coin ended him. I guess that's something only Professor X can tell us now.
3.
The OG X-Men film marks its first appearance, and it does so with one of the gnarliest death scenes you'll ever get to witness. Senator Kelly was pretty much a nothing character, so it's rather ironic that he only gained value after being forcefully turned into a mutant and then passing away due to the very same reason. His final conversation with Storm was a poignant one, but maybe bro didn't have to spook her out so much by turning into a literal puddle and then vanishing forever. It's also funny to see how calmly Storm tells the other mutants about Kelly. If I was in her place, I'd probably keep screaming until someone knocked me out.
Senator Kelly is dead.
The CGI surprisingly holds up well for a film from 2000, and it's rather tragic to see someone lose their life from a failed experiment. Well, at least the dude got to hold Halle Berry's hand before passing. I mean, I wouldn't mind that when my time comes.
You naughty, you teasing me.
Anyway, rest in peace, Senator Kelly. Your remains will be collected in a 100% recycled plastic bottle.
Stop! No!
We began this list with Cyclops, and now it's time to see his brother pass away as well. Havok has some pretty slick powers, and he has one of my favourites from the rebooted timeline. However, Apocalypse decided to come along and ruin that for everyone when he tricked Alex Summers into triggering an explosion with his own powers. Now, this isn't to say that Havok is to blame for what happens, because he did try something similar not too long ago when he saved Professor X from the Cerebro disaster. It was basically just a case of being done dirty, and Alex would go on to get disintegrated almost instantly. I mean, Quicksilver pulls off the most ridiculous set of saves right after this, and even he couldn't catch Alex in time. It just goes to show that even the fastest man alive can't do much if he reaches after your body is blasted to bits. This was a pretty disappointing way for the character to go. I mean, I really wanted to see a Havok and Cyclops combo beam at some point. But you never know, maybe the MCU can give me that now.
What happened? Where's Alex? Where's my brother?
Pretty sure I got everybody.
This is probably one of the few scenes where I do agree with all those humans who say that mutants are a threat to mankind. The end of Donald Pierce was a rather disturbing one, and yeah, he may have deserved it, but even so, such moments aren't for the faint-hearted. The fact that the ones taking his life were a bunch of little kids was pretty savage. I mean, I would have called them innocent, but I don't think that term applies to anyone who's killed a person. Whether it was the grass trapping Donald or the little shocks that kept tormenting him till his demise, it was a bit too much for anyone to take, and I really wonder how those kids must have felt after they actually realised what they'd done. Also, this death happens in the middle of the battle between Logan and his X-24 clone, so there's a lot going on at the same time. Some might call Donald's death a satisfying moment, but I'm going to go with disturbing.
Your emotions make you weak.
The Weeknd's latest album might be themed around death and rebirth, but the one who did it first was Jean Grey from The Dark Phoenix. Yeah, this movie doesn't have a lot to talk about in a positive light, but the final battle between Jean and Vuk was a pleasant experience to the eyes. Apart from the stunning visuals, we also see the end of Vuk in the most poetic way possible. All this while she wanted the Phoenix powers to herself, but when she finally got them, they were a bit too much for her to handle. The eventual explosion ended up taking her life, and we were also made to believe that Jean is a victim too, but then she's shown to have been reborn just like an actual Phoenix. I mean, if it wasn't obvious enough already, they also show a literal Phoenix forming due to the explosion. This was actually a properly written sequence with proper explosions for everything happening in it. If only the rest of the movie was treated the same way, then you know what? It would have been a massive hit.
You're wrong. My emotions make me strong.
You're predictable.
Before I begin, let me just say that Liv Schreiber was a pretty badass Saber-tooth, and the Fox universe totally missed a trick here by not including him in more projects. Just look at how he kills John Wraith in this scene. The fight goes on for a few seconds, and it only takes Saber-tooth a couple of strikes to figure out will.i.am's attack patterns. I guess Black Eyed Peas and their music aren't too different from John Wraith either now, are they? The dialogue was also impeccable, especially the part where Saber-tooth mocks Wraith for only having a biological spine and not a metaphorical one. His tone and his smile make this death feel so much more impactful. And yeah, while it's sad to see John struggling so much, it does go to show that he doesn't really have a lot of variety to offer as a fighter. Bro should have used his powers to escape while he still could.
I can feel your spine, Johnny boy. That's funny. Never knew you had one.
This movie was definitely a mistake, but you want to know an even bigger error? It was Dr. Reyes pushing Danny to the brink of death, only to have an Uno reverse card take place in the form of a highly demonized bear appearing and ripping her to shreds. Now, this isn't a death that felt sad or extreme. I'd say it was just about appropriate considering the fact that Reyes was the villain all along. She needed to be stopped by that demon bear, otherwise those kids were going to meet their respective ends. Also, if you think about it then, Reyes indirectly caused her own death. If she just trapped those kids in a force field without doing anything else, then she would have been able to conjure up an escape. However, the visual effects team really wanted that bear to make another appearance, so we ended up getting a death that was both gruesome and satisfying. Fake Deadpool will always be given that name because he doesn't hold a candle to the real Deadpool, even if both of them were actually played by Ryan Reynolds. Having said that, I can't deny his powers, which are a mix of every single mutant we'd seen in that film to that point. The final battle of X-Men Origins saw fake Deadpool taking on both Wolverine and Saber-tooth at the same time, and it seemed a fair enough battle considering the experimental mutant had a wide array of powers to exploit. Luckily, Logan knew this was his film, so he went ahead and slashed his opponent's head off with style. The death is pretty solid because of what it leads to as well. The dude still had his laser eyes on at the time of decapitation, so what follows is a lot of destruction. Yeah, I know he's technically alive if you consider the post-credit scene, but the audience was so disappointed by this film that almost everybody walked out of the halls before they even realised it. Also, there was no further movie made with the character, so we'll just count the guy as dead. Getting rid of a mutant god is no easy feat, as could be ascertained from the final battle of X-Men Apocalypse. They got Professor X fighting him in his mind and still losing, a juiced up Magneto giving it his all, Cyclops blasting his most powerful lasers, and the best they could do was slow down Apocalypse just for a little bit. Enter Jean Grey in Phoenix mode, and what follows is essentially the microwaving of En Saber-tooth. The visuals were on point, and they most definitely convinced everyone that Jean was the undisputed MVP in this film, even though she didn't really have that much screen time. The screams coming out from both Jean as well as Apocalypse totally heightened the intensity of this sequence, and seeing the mutant god being reduced to a mere skeleton was haunting, as well as reliving to watch. I mean, this guy was going to launch nuclear missiles and live up to his name, so I'll take his instant disintegration any day of the week over that. You know, this one's a heartbreaker if it's an entry above the main villain who has the movie literally named after him. Magneto has never been given any respite as a character, and just when you think he finally might have found a way to keep himself in check, some nonsense happens that further tilts him over to the dark side. The man was peacefully living with his wife and daughter, but then those idiots just had to come along and ruin everything. Losing your family in a literal second, that too because of a foolish act of incompetence, can really make you lose faith in everything you believed up until that point. That's exactly why Magneto's silent massacre that followed felt like nothing in comparison to what he just lost. I swear, man, I had tears in my eyes when I watched this scene for the first time. After so many horrific experiences, what can you even expect from a man like Eric?
Don't let it control you.
It's widely believed that Charles Xavier is the undisputed GOAT when it comes to telepathic powers.
That's why he's the GOAT! The GOAT!
Well, all of that changed when we saw what Jean Grey did to him with her Phoenix powers in X-Men The Last Stand. It all starts off on a rather neutral note as Professor X tries to bring Jean back to the surface, but it's of no use, and once the Phoenix has had enough of playing games, she decides to rip Professor X to shreds, that too in front of Magneto. And let's not forget the fact that all of this was happening while other mutants like Wolverine and Juggernaut are going at each other downstairs. The way Charles is disintegrated in front of those who have known him the longest is tragic, but the smile on his face right before he vanishes left a strong impact on everyone watching the scene. Yeah, we all know he shifted his consciousness and blah blah blah, we know all of that, but that doesn't take anything away from the impression this moment left on all of us.
Come out. Join me. Fight together in a brotherhood of our kind.
We're back to the Sentinels again, but the reason I waited until my top 10 to include Blink's death was because of how it's positioned in the sequence we witness. There's Magneto giving one of the most badass speeches of all time, and in a parallel timeline, we're seeing the Sentinels rip overpowered mutants to shred. Now, the reason Blink's murder hits harder than the others is because of how 3 Sentinels gang up on her to make sure she doesn't escape through another one of her portals. The precision and alignment of these strikes make it look like some kind of unholy trinity as well. If I didn't know any better, I'd even say that Blink was being crucified here, but kind of in a mutant way. To be fair, she did prove to be a headache for the Sentinels because of her portal powers. It was instrumental in giving the others enough time to make their escape. Okay, this one only gets so high because he literally goes out with a bang. Now, the reason Angel's death is so high up on the list is also because of the fact that he's pretty much hustled by everyone around him. First of all, you've got Nightcrawler, who only manages to pull off a mass teleportation right before the jet crashes, and then you've got Psylocke, who uses Angel to get into the jet, but leaves without even giving him as much as a second thought. This was actually a pretty sad display if you look at it from the perspective of everyone abandoning an angel when they're in danger. At the end of the day, the supposedly holy mutant met a rather unholy end. I guess the only mercy shown to him was that he didn't get to see how he got incinerated by the blast. I wonder if those wings got extra roasted though. Probably not, because Apocalypse turned them into metal. Iceman is actually supposed to be an S-tier mutant if you've read the comics, but alas, even he's no match for the ridiculously overpowered Sentinels. Bro did his best to keep them at bay, and he actually does a great job of keeping multiple Sentinels busy. After all, it's not easy to fight these beasts while also trying to protect the only chance you have to overturn their existence. However, all it takes is some extra heat blasts and our man Bobby is melted in all of 10 business seconds. Now, let me remind you that this scene is from the Rogue cut and it happens in front of Rogue and Magneto. Yeah, that must have been rough. I mean, getting roasted in front of a live audience is still something you can recover from, but I'm not too sure how well that logic would apply to getting melted. It sure looked like a painful way to go, and thank God those Sentinels actually got dealt with towards the end of the film.
If we die, you die.
Well, I don't know what kind of death befits a man who's done some of the worst possible experiments known to mankind, but I will say that Wolverine chaining Stryker to a plane and leaving him to drown was a pretty intense method of revenge. The character development here between both Logan as well as Stryker has set up a lot of potential backstory, only for it to all get butchered in X-Men Origins. Anyway, the dialogue between these two adds a lot of weight to Stryker's death because there's a lot of suspense and mystery built around them. Also, everyone likes to see the Wolverine slashing his enemies with his claws, so I guess you could say they hit two birds with one stone here. Kudos to both Hugh Jackman and Brian Cox for giving us spectacular performances as well.
You're a survivor. What was happening? I thought I was just an animal with claws.
This movie was always going to dominate today's list, but we're all out of entries now, so I present the moments where both Storm and Bishop lose their lives one after the other. Now, the main focus between the two has to be Bishop, because that man is made to absorb so many blasts from the Sentinels that he explodes right in front of our faces. Yeah, that's pretty rough if you ask me. Bro popped harder than a volcano. As far as Storm goes, she gets stabbed in the back, which is basically a form of blasphemy to the TV region, so I had to include her as well. Man. Those Sentinels will never get my forgiveness, although I'm not sure they'd even care about such a thing anyway, to be honest.
You're my family, Gene. No matter what.
Yeah, this movie may have been trash, but it did have a rather shocking death, and it was that of Mystique. Well, it was kind of understood after looking at the trailers, but even though you could say that the audience was hoping for her to survive after this. Unfortunately, a shape-shifting mutant can't exactly survive multiple impalements, and this is the last we saw of Raven. This is extremely good acting from Jennifer Lawrence actually. You see, she has to act like she's suffering as she dies, but in reality, she's actually ecstatic to finally never have to wear that blue makeup ever again. Also, Charles Xavier looks a little sus here. Like, come on bro, this is your childhood friend. At least show some sadness over seeing her die.
Logan.
I was just criticising Professor X for not showing enough concern towards Mystique, and karma has hit him immediately after in this video. Although from a chronological sequence, it'll be decades. The X-24 clone was a creepy villain but a highly effective one, especially in his introduction as he ended Charles Xavier's life while making him believe that it was actually Logan who did it. I mean, that's so diabolical that even Billy Butcher would gasp out of shock. What makes it worse is the fact that Charles has been suffering from illness for so long that he was already miserable. And then the one friend he thought he could trust ends up taking his life, at least per his perception.
All this, it wasn't me. It wasn't me. I love you.
Sophie Turner's rendition of Jean Grey was cool and all, but nothing will beat the OG Famke Janssen. The way she unleashed her Phoenix powers will forever haunt those who were lucky enough to see it in the cinemas. And yeah, her death was the highlight of an otherwise disappointing finale to an otherwise promising trilogy. What makes it worse is that the man taking her life is also the man who loves her with all his heart. The Wolverine killing Jean was the most emotional moment throughout the entire series, and you can see it in Logan's eyes as he reluctantly frees Jean from the Phoenix by killing her with his claws. Well, at least she didn't cheat on Scott till her end, right? Well, it doesn't matter if the Wolverine is back in action. Logan's death scene will forever remain the most heart-wrenching moment of Hugh Jackman's entire career, and it made us all emotional in all kinds of ways. It's such a tragic and poetic end, but it's the best possible way to end this particular character's arc. Logan's final words to Laura and their interaction as a whole further highlighted how tormented his life was.
This is what it feels like.
For Wolverine to die finally meant he could be liberated from all the suffering he's had to endure throughout his existence. It was in the final moment of mortality that the animal finally felt what it was like to be human.
Take your friends and run. They'll keep coming and coming. You don't have to fight anymore.
Hope you liked the video. Please subscribe to the TV Regent, and here's another video that I know you're going to enjoy.